I was 2 minutes away from posting a Kevin Durant trade machine video, and then DeAndre Ayton signed the largest offer sheet contract in NBA history. I was supposed to post the KD trade machine at 3 o'clock. That is now going to go out at a later date because this changed a lot of things about the Kevin Durant situation. We're going to talk about what DeAndre Ayton signing this offer sheet means for Indiana, for Phoenix, and for the entirety of the league. Now, here is the one critical key point you need to understand about DeAndre Ayton signing this offer sheet. Once he signs it, I'm going to read you directly from the Woj article here. Sign and trade deals are no longer allowed once Ayton signs the offer sheet with Indiana. If the Suns do match the offer sheet, they can't trade Ayton anywhere until at least January 15th, and they can't trade him to Indiana for a year. The reason that's important is for a variety of different reasons, but primarily, I'm sure a lot of people, myself included, saw the news and thought, oh, well, maybe this could turn into a sign and trade. Maybe they could get Miles Turner in exchange for DeAndre Ayton. That's not a thing. That's not a possibility. DeAndre Ayton cannot be traded anywhere until January 15th, which means that he can't be in a Kevin Durant trade. He can't be in a sign and trade to Indiana, which means that Phoenix's options here are limited relative to what we kind of assumed they would do coming into the offseason. They can either match the offer sheet. They have 48 hours to do so. If they do that, they bring back DeAndre Ayton, and they are $15 million over the luxury tax. It is clear at this point that Ayton is not a player that they are prioritizing within their roster. They didn't give him a max offer last offseason on an extension, in which case they would have been able to trade him this offseason and involve him in Kevin Durant trade scenarios. And they did not submit an offer to him at the beginning of his restricted free agency. So the two paths they can take here are sign a player that they clearly don't really want to a max contract, go $15 million over the luxury tax, and trade away Cam Johnson, Mikal Bridges, whoever it may be, to shave $15 million off of their payroll to not be in the luxury tax. Wouldn't be surprised if that's the route they take. Or they let DeAndre Ayton, the first overall pick in the draft from a couple of years ago that was selected ahead of Trae Young, Luka, Jaren Jackson, they let that guy walk for nothing. And this is truly, truly unprecedented. Not only is it, as I mentioned in the intro, the largest restricted free agency contract offer sheet signed ever, but the fact that it got to this point for Phoenix is pretty incredible. Like, obviously, they didn't know that the Kevin Durant thing was going to happen. They didn't know that they were going to potentially need DeAndre Ayton in these Kevin Durant trades, but their life right now would be so much easier. Even if they didn't want to pay Ayton the max at the time last offseason, their life would be so much easier if they had just given him the full max extension last offseason, been able to use him in these trades, not potentially lose him for nothing. And now there's basically no scenario in which Phoenix has as good of a roster this upcoming season as they had this previous year when they won like 64 games, had one of the best regular season records of the last 20 years in the NBA. That roster is not going to return. I would be very, very surprised, given everything we know about the ownership situation in Phoenix as relates to Sarver's willingness to spend money and or whatever craziness is potentially happening with that ownership situation, whether or not he will even be the owner a year from now. It would surprise me if they just re-signed Ayton, were $15 million into luxury tax, kept Mikal Bridges, kept Cam Johnson, kept Jay Crowder, and didn't make any adjustments to try and get under the luxury tax number. This is a hugely significant development. It's something we've been waiting on for 3 weeks now. The only reason Indiana didn't make this deal earlier is because they were waiting on the Malcolm Brogdon trade to go through. The Brogdon trade allowed them to have the max cap space available to sign DeAndre Ayton to this offer sheet. Otherwise, they would have done it a couple of weeks ago. And so Phoenix has been kind of just slow playing this whole situation, hoping they could get a trade to come together. And now they are, unless something unforeseen happens, completely out of the Kevin Durant trade sweepstakes, which is unfortunate for them because they seem to have been the favorite in terms of where KD would most like to go and play. Now, Pacers fans, hello. We haven't talked about you at all throughout the entirety of the video. We're going to now get to you guys. DeAndre Ayton, 4 years, 133 or whatever it is. That's a lot. It's a lot for DeAndre Ayton, but when you're in the position that Indiana is in, I don't really mind it because even if DeAndre Ayton never becomes like an all-NBA caliber player, a top 3, top 4 center in the league, he still is someone that is going to provide a lot of value to your team. He can average 17 and 10, maybe even 20 and 10 down the road, and just allows you flexibility with potentially trading away Miles Turner, or just, I like having that asset on the roster. It's the same reason that I would have preferred Phoenix to just re-sign Ayton to the max. He's probably not quite worth a max, but there aren't really any close to the max players in the league. You're either a max guy or you're making like 15 a year. Like, there's really no in between. And I'm fine with paying DeAndre Ayton this much money. If you're Indiana, you can get some value out of Miles Turner, and then you've got Ayton, you've got Halliburton, you've got Mathurin, you've got Chris Duarte. An interesting young core starting to develop there in Indiana. And I mean, personally, I was rooting for this just because that adds more chaos. It changes more things up in the offseason. I was waiting for this move to go ahead and happen. I like the move for Indiana. Now, it would have been interesting had they been able to maneuver some kind of sign and trade in exchange for Ayton. But again, the only thing they were waiting on was the Brogdon trade to go through. And so now the big question is, what happens with Miles Turner? I mean, Indiana has done this for years where they had him and Sabonis playing together. I feel like that has run its course. I'd be surprised if they want to go back to having him and another big on the floor at the same time. So it's Miles Turner trade season as far as I'm concerned, where there's going to be teams out there that are going to be looking to capitalize on Indiana maybe being willing to get rid of him for less than they have in the past, given the fact they now have his replacement on the roster, DeAndre Ayton. Let's not forget that this guy was the first overall pick in the draft a couple years ago, again, ahead of Luka, ahead of Trey. That was for a reason. DeAndre Ayton can be a very, very good 5 for you. And again, in certain scenarios, I think is worth a max. So good on Indiana for making this happen. Now, here's the big part of this, though, right? Kevin Durant. From the moment that he made his trade request, it was clear that Phoenix and Miami were the two places that he wanted to go. And Phoenix was kind of realistic depending on what happened with Ayton and what they were willing to give up, because you could, even though it would take away a lot of their depth, you could do like Bridges and Ayton and some picks. And whether Ayton went directly to Brooklyn or not, there was a lot of different ways you could maybe maneuver that and make that happen. The Miami thing, as I've talked about, I don't think is all that realistic at all. And now this feels like a situation that has gotten incredibly stagnant for Brooklyn, where Toronto's not willing to give up Scotty Barnes. I don't think New Orleans is a team that really wants to jump on trading Brandon Ingram and stuff in exchange for Kevin Durant right now, given how young their roster is. And I think this is pointing towards Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving potentially staying in Brooklyn. I mean, I don't want to, just say that outright, but when you just read the room, right? When you look at the situation, they could have done a Kyrie Rush trade at this point, and they haven't done it. I would presume because they want to have the possibility of bringing back Kyrie and KD. The moment they trade Kyrie, it's much less likely that KD would want to return. And then also, Phoenix, I feel like, would have been way more aggressive in trying to make a move in exchange for KD if they felt like they were on the clock with the Ayton thing, which clearly they have been. Now, the counter to that would be maybe Brooklyn only wants Devin Booker and nothing else, and so then they just moved away from the Kevin Durant situation. But this has a massive, massive impact on that. And really, the only point you can finish on here is this is an incredible misstep for Phoenix. Even if you're a Suns fan, you're thinking like, DeAndre Ayton's not a player you want to pay $30 million a year to. Even if you're of that opinion, which I think is fine, sometimes the numbers aren't exactly the end of the road here. It's not the end of the line of thought. Like, it's not just, that's a little much for DeAndre Ayton, because contextually, keeping DeAndre Ayton and or re-signing him last offseason to an extension means so much more to retaining the asset than it does, we're paying him a couple million extra per year than he's actually worth in terms of his production. So it's just one of those things where you should have just stepped up and paid him last offseason. And granted, it's easy for me to say now that we've seen it go wrong for them, but things could have been so much easier for them this offseason had they done what I think most other franchises that were in Phoenix's position would have done, and that was just pay the guy. I mean, you believed in him enough to select him first overall a couple years ago. Why then are you getting squeamish about paying him a full max contract? My guess would be that's an ownership mandate to not go into the luxury tax, and that the front office itself probably would have really liked to retain DeAndre Ayton. And my prediction here is DeAndre Ayton's going to be an Indiana Pacer next season. I would be pretty floored if Phoenix matched a max contract offer to a player that they were not willing to offer a max to in the first place, and it's a team that does not want to pay the luxury tax. The only way, in my opinion, DeAndre Ayton returns to Phoenix next season is if they find a way to get under the luxury tax by getting rid of Mikal Bridges, getting rid of Cam Johnson, getting rid of Jay Crowder and some other pieces. They are not paying the luxury tax this season. In my opinion, this Phoenix roster is going to look massively different next year as a result of this Indiana offer sheet. They might still be really good, but that core that won 64 games last year is going to look pretty different. Now, having said all that, I'm really interested to see what you guys have to say down in the comment section below about this, because I think a lot of the conversation is, as most of this video has been about, the kind of consequences of DeAndre Ayton signing the offer sheet in the first place. I want to know what you guys think about the deal in Indiana. Is it good value? Do you like the move for the Pacers? I do, but I feel like that might be a bit of a controversial opinion. Again, a lot of consequences to this, but I want to have some focus as well on DeAndre Ayton actually signing the contract in the first place.